What if I told you the single most common daily habit in the world, one enjoyed by billions, might also be one of the most powerful and scientifically proven tools for living a longer, healthier life? Welcome, my friends. Professor Vitalis here with your daily dose of wisdom and wellness, where science and experience walk hand in hand. Today, we are diving deep into a topic close to my own heart and, I suspect, to many of yours: coffee. We are going to explore the very latest data, looking forward into what 2025 has revealed. But before we begin, I must ask you to stay with me until the very end. It is in the final moments of our discussion today that I will consolidate all this science into the most crucial, actionable advice. I will reveal not just if you should drink coffee, but precisely how to drink it for maximum benefit, which brewing methods may be helping or harming you, and I will give you the optimal daily dose down to the milligram for true longevity. This is the information that turns general knowledge into a personal health strategy, so you won't want to miss it. In this deep dive, my goal is to provide the most comprehensive overview you have ever encountered. We will start by examining the very mechanisms of how coffee works within your body. Then, we will journey through its effects on our most vital organs, the heart and our intricate network of blood vessels, the hard-working liver, and of course, the command center of our being, the brain. We will also courageously confront the other side of the coin. We must discuss the real contraindications, the genuine risks, and the complex interactions coffee can have with the vitamins, minerals, and medications you might be taking. We'll tackle the persistent questions about dependence, and we will shed light on a compound called acrylamide, which forms during the roasting process, to see if it's a concern. Finally, we will compare the various ways we prepare this beloved beverage, filtered, unfiltered, instant, natural, and even decaffeinated, to determine which one is truly the champion of health. For your convenience, this entire discussion will be chaptered, allowing you to easily revisit any section that particularly piques your interest. So let us begin with the heart and blood vessels. When we consider the greatest threats to a long and vibrant life, three conditions stand out as the primary causes of premature death in our modern world: heart attacks, strokes, and type 2 diabetes. This is a sobering reality, but here's where the story takes a fascinating and hopeful turn. Compelling evidence shows that moderate, consistent coffee consumption significantly reduces the risk of all three. A landmark study published just this year, in 2024, built upon the vast database of the UK Biobank, revealed a connection so clear it simply cannot be ignored. Now, for those unfamiliar, the UK Biobank is not just any study. It is a monumental scientific resource, a British project containing the detailed medical data of 500,000 individuals. It includes everything from blood tests and medical scans to lifestyle habits and disease history. This incredible depth allows scientists like myself to uncover truly reliable links between our daily choices and our long-term health outcomes. What did these scientists find? The data was remarkably clear. Individuals who consumed approximately 3 cups of coffee per day, which translates to about 250 to 300 milligrams of caffeine, assuming a standard 80 to 100 milligrams per cup, experienced nearly half the risk of suffering a heart attack, a stroke, or developing diabetes compared to those who abstained from coffee entirely. Think about that for a moment. A simple, enjoyable daily ritual, cutting your risk for these devastating conditions by almost half. Even more surprisingly, the study looked at those who consumed much higher doses, up to 5 or 6 cups a day, which is a substantial 450 to 600 milligrams of caffeine. Even at this high intake, their health markers were still significantly better than those of non-coffee drinkers. However, the data points to a clear sweet spot, an optimal zone for benefit, which appears to be right around those 3 cups, or approximately 300 milligrams of caffeine per day. But what about heart rhythm? This is a common and understandable concern. I often hear people ask, "Professor, doesn't coffee disrupt the heart's rhythm or cause palpitations?" It feels intuitive that a stimulant might do this. Yet, a massive analysis involving nearly 400,000 people demonstrated the exact opposite. For every additional daily cup of coffee, which is about 80 to 100 milligrams of caffeine, the risk of developing an arrhythmia actually decreased by approximately 3%. This finding was so robust that it held true even for individuals with a specific genetic variation that causes them to metabolize caffeine more slowly. This is related to an enzyme in the liver known as CYP1A2. You might think that for these slow metabolizers in whom caffeine lingers longer, the risk would surely increase. But even for them, the science showed that coffee did not elevate the risk of arrhythmias. The fear, it seems, is not supported by the evidence. Let's take this a step further and look at heart failure, a condition where the heart muscle weakens and can't pump blood effectively. A major study, published in the esteemed journal Circulation, Heart Failure, followed participants over time and found that for each additional cup of coffee consumed daily, the risk of developing heart failure dropped by a remarkable 5 to 12%. This is a cumulative effect, meaning the habit, practiced over years, fortifies the heart. The conclusion from this wealth of data is both clear and reassuring. Coffee is not an enemy to your heart. Quite the opposite. When consumed in moderate doses, say 2 to 4 cups a day, equating to 200 to 400 milligrams of caffeine, it is consistently associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, let's turn our attention to the liver, our body's tireless filtration plant and metabolic powerhouse. A comprehensive meta-analysis from 2021, which pooled data from studies involving over 73,000 people, brought forth some astounding results. It found that coffee drinkers had a 23% lower risk of developing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a condition of fat accumulation in the liver that is becoming epidemic. And what if someone already has a fatty liver? The benefits continue. The same analysis showed that for those with existing liver issues, drinking coffee lowered the risk of the condition progressing to more severe stages like fibrosis, which is scarring of the liver, and cirrhosis, which is irreversible damage, by an incredible 32%. Data from that same UK biobank we discussed earlier reinforces this, showing that coffee lovers have a 20% lower risk of chronic liver disease in general, and stunningly, their risk of dying from these diseases is almost half that of people who don't drink coffee. What's truly fascinating here is that these benefits were observed across the board, whether the coffee was ground, instant, or even decaffeinated. This is a crucial clue. It tells us that while caffeine plays a role, the protective magic isn't solely due to the stimulant. It's the entire symphony of compounds within the coffee bean working in concert. Powerful antioxidants, chlorogenic acids, and a host of other polyphenols. These substances work together to reduce inflammation and prevent the formation of scar tissue. It's no wonder that in some medical circles, a cup of strong black coffee is being hailed as the new milk thistle, a modern evidence-backed protector of the liver. From the liver, we travel to the command center, the brain. Here, the evidence is just as compelling. Multiple meta-analyses show a clear and consistent pattern. Regular coffee drinkers have a 25% to 30% lower risk of developing Parkinson's disease compared to non-drinkers. The mechanism seems to be linked to caffeine's effect on adenosine receptors in the brain cells, which helps protect these delicate neurons from damage. When it comes to Alzheimer's disease, the data is a bit more complex and sometimes contradictory. However, the signals are promising. Advanced imaging techniques like functional MRI scans reveal that individuals who have consistently consumed 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day throughout their adult lives tend to have fewer beta-amyloid plaques in their brains. These plaques are the sticky protein clumps that are the hallmark of, and a primary driver behind, Alzheimer's disease. Beyond disease prevention, these 2 to 3 daily cups are also strongly associated with better cognitive function as we age. In practical terms, this means your brain stays sharper for longer. You've likely experienced this in your own life. A cup of coffee can bring a profound increase in concentration and focus. It can also significantly reduce the risks of depression and help you maintain a high level of productivity throughout the day. The antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds in this remarkable drink are not just waking you up, they are actively shielding your neurons. Let's now address the elephant in the room: cancer. For years, coffee was clouded by suspicion. But in 2016, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC, made a landmark decision. After reviewing all the available evidence, they officially removed coffee from the list of possible carcinogens. Let this be clear, no matter what you may have heard anecdotally. Today, modern data paints the opposite picture entirely. Coffee drinkers appear to have a lower risk of several types of tumors compared to people who don't drink it. For example, in the context of liver health, each daily cup of coffee, that 80 to 100 milligrams of caffeine, is associated with a 15% reduction in the risk of hepatocellular carcinoma, the most common form of liver cancer. There are also promising signals regarding a reduced risk for endometrial and colorectal cancers. The mechanism is logical. The polyphenols and antioxidants in coffee reduce chronic inflammation and oxidative stress, two of the key drivers of cancer development. But there is an important nuance to discuss here: acrylamide. This is a chemical that forms when starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures, like in the roasting of coffee beans or the making of French fries and cookies. In very high doses, this substance has been shown to cause tumors in animal studies. So the natural question is, how much is in our daily cup, and should we be worried? We will dissect this specific risk in detail a little later. Moving on to metabolism and weight, the caffeine in coffee acts as a stimulant, triggering the release of adrenaline. This, in turn, signals your fat cells to release fatty acids into the bloodstream, making them available as fuel. If you drink a cup of coffee before a workout, you can actually increase your fat-burning efficiency by as much as 30% compared to exercising without it. Coffee also has a mild effect on appetite, often reducing it slightly. Of course, we must be realistic. Your body develops a tolerance to caffeine's metabolic effects over time, so it's not some magic weight loss pill. However, large-scale observational studies consistently show that regular coffee drinkers are less likely to suffer from metabolic syndrome and obesity. That same UK Biobank study revealed that coffee drinkers tend to have lower levels of very low-density lipoproteins, or VLDL, and fewer free fatty acids in their blood. Both of these are incredibly beneficial for your metabolic health and the long-term integrity of your blood vessels. Now we must turn to the risks and limitations, because responsible health advice is never one-sided. During pregnancy, caffeine freely crosses the placenta. The crucial issue is that a developing fetus lacks the enzymes to break down caffeine effectively. Therefore, it is strongly recommended that pregnant women limit their intake to no more than 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is roughly 1 to 2 small cups of coffee. It's also vital to remember that caffeine isn't just in coffee, it's in tea, even green tea, many soft drinks, and some chocolates. You must consider the total daily load. Up to 300 milligrams might be tolerated, but anything higher is strongly discouraged, as the risk of pregnancy complications rises significantly. For women in menopause, very high coffee consumption can be linked to a slight decrease in bone mineral density. However, this effect is generally minor and can be completely neutralized. If you maintain a nutritious diet, ensure adequate calcium and vitamin D intake, and perhaps enjoy your coffee with a splash of milk, this risk becomes negligible. It's also worth noting that for some women in perimenopause, caffeine can act as a trigger, intensifying hot flashes. What about anxiety and restlessness? Many people feel that coffee is the direct cause. There's a clear biological reason for this. Coffee stimulates the release of adrenaline and then cortisol, while simultaneously blocking adenosine, which is our brain's natural braking system. If you already have a tendency towards anxiety or are particularly sensitive to stimulants, large doses of coffee, say around 5 cups a day, can absolutely amplify symptoms of anxiety and in some cases even trigger panic attacks. This has been clearly demonstrated in controlled experiments. For those individuals, the best approach might be a single cup in the morning or switching to a high-quality decaffeinated coffee to get the other benefits without the stimulation. And then there is sleep. It's common knowledge that coffee can interfere with our rest. For some people, like myself, its effects are not as pronounced. I can have a coffee in the evening and sleep soundly. However, for most, caffeine has a half-life of about 6 to 8 hours. This means that if you have a cup of coffee in the late afternoon, half of that caffeine is still circulating in your system when you're trying to fall asleep. The logical and simple rule is to have your last cup of coffee no later than midday or early afternoon. Regarding blood pressure, for individuals new to coffee, it can cause a temporary spike of 5 to 10 mmHg. However, in regular habituated drinkers, this effect usually disappears completely. In fact, some long-term studies suggest that regular coffee drinkers have a lower risk of developing hypertension than non-drinkers. But if you have blood pressure that is poorly controlled, it is wise to limit your coffee intake or switch to decaf until it is well managed. Let's talk about the gastrointestinal tract. For some people, coffee can worsen heartburn or acid reflux. For others, it has no effect at all. This appears to be a highly individual reaction. At the same time, for many, coffee acts as a mild and reliable laxative. It stimulates peristalsis, the muscular contractions of your intestines, which can be very helpful for preventing constipation. A word of caution about heartburn, however. I strongly advise against drinking coffee right before a strenuous workout, whether it's heavy lifting, high-intensity intervals, or a long run or bike ride. The combination of the coffee's acidity and the physical exertion can lead to severe heartburn, so intense it might even be mistaken for a heart attack. To avoid such a frightening and unpleasant experience, it is far better to enjoy your coffee after your workout, not before. Now we arrive at the practical question. Which method of preparation yields the healthiest cup of coffee? Let's also discuss temperature and dig deeper into that concern about acrylamide. The primary difference between filtered and unfiltered coffee lies in the oils. Unfiltered methods, like a Turkish ibrick, a French press, or even espresso, allow natural oily compounds from the bean, called diterpenes, specifically cafestol and caweol, to pass into your cup. These compounds have been shown to slightly raise levels of total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, often called the bad cholesterol. A paper filter, however, is remarkably effective at trapping these substances. A large Norwegian study that followed 500,000 people over many years found that those who drank filtered coffee had a mortality rate that was 15% lower than those who drank no coffee at all. In contrast, those who drank only unfiltered coffee had a mortality rate that was about the same as non-drinkers. One specific finding stood out. For men over the age of 60, consuming unfiltered coffee was linked to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and death. For overall health, while a cup of unfiltered coffee here and there is not a major threat, if you have concerns about cholesterol, filtered coffee is the superior choice. Where does espresso fit in? Espresso is an intermediate case. The fine metal filter in an espresso machine traps some of the oils, but not all of them. 1 or 2 shots of espresso a day is perfectly safe for most people. However, if you have high LDL cholesterol, consuming 5 or 6 shots daily is probably not advisable. What about instant coffee, which is so often maligned? It turns out that on average, it contains less caffeine per cup, about 60 milligrams compared to the nearly 100 milligrams in a cup of brewed ground coffee. More importantly, it still contains a rich profile of beneficial antioxidants. Studies confirm that instant coffee provides a similar protective effect for the heart and liver, and its overall health benefits still far outweigh drinking no coffee at all. And decaffeinated coffee. It beautifully retains most of the health advantages of regular coffee. The benefits for the liver, for diabetes risk, and for your blood vessels largely remain intact. Of course, it won't give you that jolt of alertness, and its protective effect against Parkinson's is reduced since caffeine is key to that mechanism. But nearly all the other beneficial properties are preserved. Regarding the temperature of your coffee, this is a point of safety. Consuming very hot beverages, anything above 149 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 degrees Celsius, can cause thermal injury to the delicate lining of your esophagus. The International Agency for Research on Cancer emphasizes that the increased risk of esophageal cancer is linked to the burns from hot liquids, not to the chemical properties of coffee itself. So, let your coffee cool down a bit. Drink it warm, not scalding, ideally below 140 degrees Fahrenheit or 60 degrees Celsius. It's safer, and you can often appreciate the subtle flavors of the coffee more fully. Now, let's circle back to acrylamide. Yes, this compound is formed during roasting. It's also in many other foods we eat. But the amount present in a typical cup of coffee is very small. Your daily dose of acrylamide from coffee represents only about 5 to 10% of the reference dose that authorities consider safe. Interestingly, instant coffee and dark roasts tend to have slightly less acrylamide than very light roasts. A paper filter has no effect on acrylamide, as it's not part of the oily fraction. The bottom line is, you do not need to fear the acrylamide from the normal amounts of coffee that we consume. This brings us to a few persistent myths surrounding coffee that we must dismantle with science. First, the myth that coffee dehydrates you. This is simply not true. For a regular coffee drinker, the body adapts, and a cup of coffee contributes to your daily fluid intake, much like a cup of water does. While you should never replace all your water with coffee, it absolutely does not cause net dehydration. The second myth, coffee damages the heart. As we have extensively discussed, the evidence points to the contrary. The risk of arrhythmias is actually lower in coffee drinkers. The third myth, coffee causes cancer. Again, this is outdated information. The IARC has exonerated coffee, and the only real danger is from drinking it at scalding hot temperatures. And the fourth, pervasive myth, coffee leaches vitamins and minerals from your body. There's a tiny kernel of truth here. that has been blown wildly out of proportion, often by ill-informed sources. Yes, coffee can have a minor effect on vitamin B1 and can slightly increase calcium excretion. But this is only clinically significant in cases of extreme malnutrition combined with drinking liters and liters of black coffee or tea daily. For a person with a reasonably balanced diet, this effect is negligible. Let's look closer at these interactions. Regarding vitamin B1 or thiamine, certain enzymes in coffee and tea can degrade it. However, vitamin C protects vitamin B1 from this degradation. So if your diet includes fruits and vegetables, this effect is completely neutralized. What about iron? Yes, the polyphenols in coffee can reduce the absorption of non-heme iron, the type found in plant foods, by about 1/3. But this only happens if you drink coffee with your meal. The solution is beautifully simple. Just create a 1 to 2 hour buffer between your meal and your coffee, and the problem is solved. And calcium? People worry about osteoporosis, but let's look at the facts. 100 milligrams of caffeine leads to the excretion of about 6 milligrams of calcium. To lose just 60 milligrams of calcium, you would need to drink about 10 cups of coffee, which is far beyond typical consumption. Considering our daily need is 1,200 milligrams, this loss is minuscule. Even more remarkably, adding just 2 teaspoons of milk to your cup of coffee completely compensates for this minor loss. For those with osteoporosis or in menopause, it's simply a matter of being mindful of your total calcium and vitamin D intake, not of fearing coffee. Coffee can also interact with certain medications. The liver enzyme that metabolizes caffeine, CYP1A2, is also involved in processing other drugs. Some antibiotics and antidepressants can slow down this enzyme, making caffeine's effects last longer. Conversely, smoking speeds up the enzyme's activity. Caffeine can also weaken the effects of beta blockers and enhance the effects of bronchodilators used for asthma. The cardinal rule is simple. Always take medication with water, not coffee, to ensure proper absorption and to be gentle on your stomach. Now, what about addiction? Coffee does not cause a true addiction in the clinical sense. The DSM-5, the primary diagnostic manual for mental health disorders, does not recognize caffeine addiction. It does, however, acknowledge caffeine withdrawal syndrome. If you suddenly stop drinking coffee, you might experience headaches, fatigue, and irritability. These symptoms typically start 12 to 24 hours after your last cup, peak on the first or second day, and resolve on their own within 2 to 9 days. The World Health Organization's ICD-11A LSO does not list caffeine addiction as a diagnosis, only noting sleep and anxiety disorders from excessive use. Should you drink coffee on an empty stomach or after food? Drinking coffee on an empty stomach can cause a sharper spike in cortisol and blood sugar. This can be followed by a crash, where your blood sugar drops below its initial level, leading to fatigue, irritability, and sometimes a craving for sugar. From a physiological standpoint, it is often better to drink coffee after a meal, or at least with a small snack. This will also be gentler on your stomach lining. If coffee on an empty stomach gives you no discomfort, then you are likely fine. If it does, the solutions are simple. Opt for a darker roast which is less acidic. Always have it after food. Add a little milk, or choose a low-acid or decaffeinated variety. A question I often see is, who funds these studies? Can we really trust this information? This is a healthy and critical question. The key data sources I've referenced, like the UK Biobank and large Harvard cohort studies, are primarily funded by government and university grants. These are independent projects, free from industry influence. While some studies are supported by coffee industry associations, their findings generally align with those from independent research. Even if we were to disregard all industry-sponsored studies, the overall conclusion would remain the same. Moderate coffee consumption is more frequently associated with benefit than with harm. Finally, I must acknowledge a very personal and important point that often comes up. If coffee makes you feel bad, if it gives you heartburn, anxiety, palpitations, or high blood pressure, then it is not for you and your experience is valid. But for millions upon millions of other people, coffee is associated with overwhelmingly positive feelings. For me personally, it's a wonderful ritual to start the day, knowing that a warm, delicious cup of my favorite coffee awaits me. So, how many cups of coffee should you drink per day? For a healthy adult, the generally accepted upper limit is around 400 milligrams of caffeine, which corresponds to roughly 3 to 4 standard cups. The optimal dose, where the greatest health benefits are seen compared to non-drinkers, appears to be right around 3 cups a day, or 300 milligrams of caffeine, for For pregnant women, the limit is 200 milligrams, or 1 to 2 small cups maximum. Coffee is not recommended for adolescents and certainly not for children. And always, always listen to your own body and its unique sensitivity. The final verdict is this: coffee, in moderation, is not an enemy. It is an ally. It is linked to a lower risk of heart attack, stroke, diabetes, liver disease, and certain cancers. It supports your brain health and enhances concentration. The sweet spot is around 3 cups a day, totaling about 300 milligrams of caffeine. You can, and perhaps should, drink your coffee not with fear, but with enjoyment and for your health. Knowledge only works when you apply it. I'm Professor Vitalis. Stay curious, stay healthy, and never stop learning.